There's this real feeling in Malaysia right now, a frustration you can almost touch. It's about the cost of things, the ringgit. It just feels like a constant squeeze for so many people. And you get this sense that maybe, just maybe, your everyday struggles aren't really being heard or maybe even dismissed. It hits home, doesn't it, at the market, at the petrol pump. And this weekend, well, all that feeling looks set to boil over in KL with the Turun Anwar rally. People are already calling it potentially the biggest anti-PM protest since the Najib days. It really makes you ask, is this just about one leader stepping down?
Yeah.
Or is something, I don't know, more fundamental shifting in how Malaysians view power and their right to dissent?
That's absolutely this core question here. And the organizers, they're pretty clear about their stated reasons. They talk about widespread people's anger. Anger over, well, what they see is the government not making good on reform promises. And the list of grievances is quite specific, isn't it? Rising taxes, price hikes on essentials, corruption worries, subsidy cuts, things that directly hit people's finances. They're really pushing back against the idea that this is some, politically engineered thing. They say it's grassroots and the numbers they're hoping for. Wow. The Secretariat's deputy chairman, Hilman Idam, is talking hundreds of thousands, like 130,000 up to maybe 300,000. And then you have some opposition figures throwing out a million?
A million. That's
Wait.
quite a range, isn't it? From 130K to a million. What do you make of that huge gap? Does it say something about, well, their strategy maybe? Or just how confident they really are?
It does make you wonder about the precision, yeah.
Especially when you think back, didn't they have a flash mob just recently to promote this?
They did.
And reports said maybe only 300 people showed up for that.
Right. So that context makes these huge predictions seem even, well, bolder.
It feels less like a headcount forecast and more like building a narrative, like creating this feeling of overwhelming momentum.
Exactly. It's about perception, perhaps more than prediction. The number itself becomes part of the political message.
So how's the government taking all this? They must have a counter-narrative.
Oh, absolutely. From their side, it's framed very differently. A political secretary to the finance minister, Muhammad Kamil Abdulmunim, he basically dismissed the whole thing, called it proof the opposition has a mental block to present ideas, said they haven't even offered a credible alternative PM candidate. And the government keeps pointing to economic data, saying things are actually recovering and growing consistently. They argue that figures on growth, inflation, jobs, investment, they're being, quote, demonized because of hatred and greed, basically dismissing the rally's premise.
And didn't the PM announce some sweeteners right before this? Cash aid, fuel price cuts.
Yes, interesting timing. RN100 cash aid for adults, a small cut in RN95 price, delaying toll hikes.
But the organizers just see that as bait, right? They don't think it'll stop people coming out.
That's their line, yes. They say it won't affect support.
Okay, so apart from the economic counter-arguments, what about the rally itself? How is the government handling the actual event, the right to assemble?
Well, officially, the stance is supportive of democratic rights. The PM's senior press secretary, Tunku Nasrullah Abaida, has reiterated that they uphold freedom of assembly, provided it's peaceful. And the Prime Minister himself apparently gave assurances, no intimidation from authorities. He even told the police, the Royal Malaysia Police, to cooperate and facilitate things, as long as it stays lawful and peaceful.
So projecting an image of respecting democracy.
Right. But then there's the however.
Ah, okay. What's the catch?
The catch seems to be aimed squarely at civil servants. There's been a clear warning. Participate, and you could face disciplinary action. The Chief Secretary, Shamsul Azri Abu Bakar, explicitly stated that attending goes against the national principles loyalty to king and country.
That's a very fine line they're walking, isn't it? Celebrating democracy, the right to protest even against yourself, but also demanding loyalty from your own workforce and ensuring order.
That's a classic tension, yeah. How much dissent do you permit while maintaining stability and the integrity of the civil service? It really highlights that balancing act every government has to perform. Definitely. Now let's dig into this specific claim from the organizers. Anti-Anwar, not anti-government.
They want the PM out, but they say they're not trying to topple the whole administration. What's the thinking there? Is it just rhetoric, or is there a strategy?
Well, many observers think it's quite a shrewd strategy, actually. Think about it. Anwar Ibrahim is both Prime Minister and Finance Minister. So a lot of those unpopular policies, the new taxes, the subsidy removals, they land right at his doorstep, politically speaking.
So by focusing just on him, they might pull in people who are unhappy about specific policies, even if they don't hate the whole government.
Exactly. It potentially broadens the tent. You attract the Anwar haters, sure, but also maybe just people feeling the pinch from specific decisions linked directly to him.
Okay, so it widens the potential pool of protesters, but practically speaking, in Malaysia's system, can you really be anti-PM without being effectively anti-government?
That's where it gets tricky. Structurally, it's very difficult to separate the two. If a prime minister resigns in a parliamentary system like Malaysia's, what usually
Oh,
happens?
all cabinet goes with him, right?
Precisely. The entire cabinet would likely dissolve. And that leads you down one of two paths. Either parliament dissolves, meaning a snap general election.
Or a new government forms without an election, under a different PM.
Correct. A new cabinet, maybe a new coalition, but under a new leader chosen from the existing MPs. So either way you slice it, the government as a whole either falls or undergoes a massive shift.
So the anti-Anwar, not anti-government line, while may be useful for messaging.
In practice, it still points towards a fundamental change in government. It inevitably creates opportunities for the opposition, potentially boosting their bargaining power or even paving a path back to power.
Right, the distinction kind of evaporates under scrutiny. And speaking of big political shifts and figures, Mahathir Mohamad has weighed in. And his comments are, well, pretty stark. He's backing the rally, arguing Malaysians are suffering desperately. He even made some really shocking claims, didn't he, about people being driven to suicide or harming families because of the economy.
He did. Very strong emotive language. He painted a picture of extreme desperation.
And he also hit out at the PM's legitimacy, correct, saying he wasn't properly democratically elected because it was through a unity government deal after the election.
Yes, that's his argument. Since Anwar didn't get an absolute majority initially and formed a unity government post-election, Mahathir claims he lacks a democratic mandate and should therefore resign.
Wow. Okay, so how do those claims stack up, especially the ones about extreme suffering and societal breakdown?
Well, that's where analysis tends to diverge from his rhetoric. Many would argue that while economic hardship is real for many, Malaysia does have social safety nets. Things like support for the B40 group, the lower-income households, they're generally seen as cushioning against that kind of absolute destitution Mahathir described.
So there isn't widespread evidence of the extreme incidents he mentioned.
Not widely reported in the national news, no.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, is his language an accurate reflection? Or is it perhaps designed to amplify anger and mobilize people?
And what about the legitimacy argument? If forming a unity government makes the PM not democratically elected?
Then logically, wouldn't that apply to the entire government he leads?
Right.
If you follow that logic, it doesn't just imply the PM should resign, it implies the whole government lacks legitimacy, which would point towards needing a completely new general election, not just a leadership swap. It really brings the whole process of government formation after a hung parliament into question.
It certainly does. Okay, let's pull back a bit. What's the bigger picture here? What does this rally signify for the opposition, for the political landscape overall?
Some analysts are calling this a potential watershed moment, particularly for the opposition. If they get a really high turnout, it massively boosts their narrative that the current government is failing. It could give them sustained momentum, keep their supporters energized, maybe carry them closer to the next GE. That's crucial when you're out of power and don't have government resources.
So the stakes are incredibly high for them.
Absolutely. But there's a flip side.
A low turnout.
A low turnout could be devastating for their credibility. It would make it much harder to convince anyone, including their own base, that they're a genuine alternative ready to govern.
So huge potential upside, but also a massive risk.
Precisely. And interestingly, not everyone outside the main political parties is on board with this rally, even if they have criticisms of the government.
Oh, like who?
Several prominent NGOs, especially those focused on institutional reforms, groups like BERSI, Transparency International Malaysia, they've actually put out statements distancing themselves from the rally organizers.
Why is that?
They seem wary of any move that looks like a midterm change of government through the back door. They explicitly referenced the Sheraton move, that previous political upheaval.
Ah, so they're worried about political instability derailing reform efforts.
That seems to be the core concern.
Yeah.
They're emphasizing that real, lasting institutional reforms need political stability. Their message to the opposition is essentially, be a constructive check and balance, hold the government accountable, but don't try to destabilize the whole system right now.
That's a really important counter-perspective: stability for reform versus disruption for change. Okay, so we've really unpacked a lot today, delving into the Turun Anwar rally, the competing narratives, the strategies, the high stakes. We've heard the organizers' calls rooted in public anger, the government's defense based on economic figures, and these nuanced views from analysts and civil society. It's a complex snapshot of Malaysian democracy in action, grappling with very real economic pressures and deep political feelings. It's been a really dense but vital look at a moment that could genuinely influence Malaysia's political path forward. As you've listened to all this, what strikes you most about how these different arguments and perspectives are playing out against each other? And maybe here's something to chew on after we finish. When you look at Malaysia, what ultimately drives real political change and accountability? Is it the noise and heat of big public protests like this one? Or is it the slower, perhaps quieter grind of trying to achieve institutional reform and long term economic stability that truly shapes the country's future?